Which players have fallen the most in dynasty value over the last 30 days? We're talking about that in today's video. As always, guys, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. Help us get to 1,300 subscribers. It's our monthly Dynasty Fallers video. We put these out every single month during the season, during the off season, because I think it's incredibly important to keep tabs on the market. Who's falling, who's rising, when to buy low, when to sell high. That's what Dynasty is all about, right? That's exactly what Dynasty is all about. And these are according to KeepTradeCut. So are they perfect? No, but it gives you a general idea on how people are feeling. Starting off with Drake May, who kind of fluctuates between this QB7, QB10 range. You know, sometimes he's ahead of guys like Herbert, Caleb, CJ Stroud. Sometimes he's behind those guys. He seems to have fallen a few spots. Not 100% sure why. What I'll say about Drake May, and half the reason why I make these videos is just to have some discussion on these players. I think this time next year that we're talking about Drake May as a top 5 quarterback in dynasty value. I think he can replace someone like a Joe Burrow potentially. It's going to be really hard to get into the top 5 because it is guys like Daniels, Allen, Lamar, Burrow, and Hurts. But I think with the youth and potentially what we're going to see from Drake May in year 2, I think he's going to be in the top 5. The guy's special, in my opinion. The rushing ability, like he's going to have difference-making rushing production. 500-600 yards, maybe creeps into 700, but I feel pretty comfortable in saying I think Drake May is going to rush for over 500 yards next year. And that's difference-making stuff, right? 500 yards over a 17-game season is basically giving you 3 extra points, a rushing floor of 3 points every single game added to your total. If you play in 4 point per passing touchdown, you're getting 75% of a touchdown every single game from his legs. That's not even adding into what maybe he scores 3, 4, 5 touchdowns. I think the guy's special. If you go and look at his per game numbers, like his, if you go to Fantasy Pros and look at how many points per game did Drake May score last year, it looks terrible. It's at 13.4. Part of the reason is because he had one game where he came in for Jacoby Brissett at the end, put up 2.1 points. That affects his average. Another game where they have on Fantasy Pros week 5, it's giving him a 0. That's counting towards his value. Week 18, he also had a 0. If you take out the 4 games where Drake May basically didn't play those games, he actually averaged almost 15 and a half points per game, or over 15 and a half points per game, which would have been good for QB 15. That's as a rookie on a team where he was throwing the ball to Kayshon Boutte and Hunter Henry and Jalen Polk and Demario Douglas, like not very good weapons, that's for sure. Now, I will say this. The weapons are better. They're not incredible, but they're better. You got Stephon Diggs. You drafted Kyle Williams. Demario Douglas is still there. Those other guys, Boutte, Bourne, Mac Hollins are there. Hunter Henry's still there. Austin Hooper, Travion Henderson, a great pass-catching back. I expect big things from Drake May. And again, I think about this by the end of the 2025 regular season, we're going to be talking about Drake May as a top 5 dynasty quarterback. That's just my opinion. JJ McCarthy. I view this one as a little bit of a market correction. JJ McCarthy was like skyrocketing up boards. I think he got as high as like the QB 12 or 13 at some point. QB 14 was the highest he got. And it was kind of funny just to see him like progress through the offseason where it's like, okay, yeah, the Vikings are gonna go with JJ McCarthy, and he started to move up. I think this is fine for McCarthy. The one thing I'll say about McCarthy in general is like I do feel like some of his value comes from what Sam Darnold did last year. We're saying, well, if Sam Darnold could do it, it must have just been the Vikings and Kevin O'Connell and Justin Jefferson and Hawkinson and Addison. And I'm not disagreeing that those guys had a huge part in helping Darnold do what he did, where he threw for 35 touchdowns and over 4,300 yards. But that doesn't necessarily mean that just any quarterback can come in and throw for 35 touchdowns and over 4,000 yards. So I like McCarthy. I think he's appropriately ranked. I do feel like a little bit of his optimism is baked. The optimism, a little bit that's baked into it is the fact that Darnold did so well last year. And I hate valuing players because of what other people have done. Think about Marvin Harrison Jr. last year, and this is more for redraft, Marvin Harrison Jr. last year, if you don't play redraft, he was going in the early second round, early to mid second round, the highest a rookie wide receiver had ever been drafted. And part of the reason that was because of the people who came before him, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Puka Nakua, these guys where it's like, oh, well, this must be the new norm. We must get these rookie receivers every single year, these studs, right? And so I'm just a little bit hesitant about that. But again, I think he's kind of ranked right where he should be. Into the running backs here, Najee Harris is falling. He's fallen quite far from RB25 to RB41. What I'll say about Najee Harris is I personally still think that he's going to be heavily involved in the Chargers offense. I think he's going to be a little bit of a thorn in the side for Amarion Hampton year one. Now, I think Amarion Hampton's incredible. I've been on the boat of he's the 102, could potentially be better than Ashton Genty. There's a world where he's just better than Genty. I think he's awesome, but I know Harbaugh likes Najee Harris. I know this team wants to run the ball. They're probably going to run the ball over 500 times this year. They're probably going to run the ball close to 30 times per game, which is, I think, in a 17-game season, 520, 515 carries. That's what I imagine for the Chargers. They have no reason to just give Amarion Hampton 25 carries. Najee never gets hurt. He never fumbles the ball. He's not explosive. He's not this amazing running back, but he does his job. And I think teams value that. That's why the Steelers stuck with him. And that's why I think the Chargers are going to give Najee Harris, in my opinion, Najee Harris is going to, if he stays healthy 17 games, he's going to push 220, 230 carries this year. And that means, in my opinion, that still means Amarion Hampton could be good, in my opinion. Right. I still think Amarion Hampton, I think both of them can be in the top 24 because I do think this team's going to run the ball so much. But I just wanted to point that out about Najee. Yeah, he's falling. Yeah, he probably should be falling. But I still think that he's going to be potentially a low-end RB2 this year for a majority of the year. Travis Etienne, also falling from RB28 to RB32. I guess this is the Bashal Tutin draft pick or something like that. I get it. Travis Etienne's not Liam Cohen's guy. And I do think Liam Cohen's going to want to bring his own guys in eventually. But if I had to bank on one running back, whether it's Etienne, Bigsby, or Tutin, to be the most successful on that team in 2025, I do think it's going to be Etienne, just because I think he's a good pass catcher. I think he's explosive with the ball in his hands. And so, yeah, could they run a little bit more of like a Bucky Irving and a Bucky Irving, Rachaad White type of system here, but now it's a three-headed monster? Maybe. I think Bigsby is the one to worry about the most personally, and he also is falling. But again, I'm not saying Etienne shouldn't be ranked here or he should be ranked higher or whatever. All I'm saying is, like, I do think that Etienne, out of all three of the running backs, has the best season for fantasy in 2025, assuming health. Jaylen Warren is another one. And I think this one's interesting because I don't really see much changing for Jaylen Warren. I think he's going to kind of do what he's been doing the last couple of years, which is essentially getting 8 to 10 carries a game. And hopefully he can get back to the 3.5 catches per game that he got in 2023. Last year, he was a full catch per game lower. In 2023, he had over 60 catches, averaged 3.6 receptions per game, 8.8 carries per game. I think that's probably where Jaylen Warren's going to fit in. So I don't really see that changing. So I understand him dropping because we were kind of hedging our bets a little bit. We were raising his ranking up a little bit because we thought, potentially like, oh, maybe he is the guy, right? Like maybe he's the guy. He's potentially the guy. That's not going to happen, obviously. But what Jaylen Warren did in 2023, which is he was basically, I think he finished as a top 24 running back, but his points per game was more as an RB3. That's kind of where I see him, where he's going to be. And there's potential that they use him just a little bit more or something like that. So Again, my hope for Jaylen Warren is that we see about 150 carries and 50-60 catches. So about 200 to 215 touches with like 50 to 60 of those being catches. And then we'll see about the touchdowns. Jordan Mason also dropping. This one, I was a little bit of a head scratcher, in my opinion. I'm just going to double check here. I'm pretty sure the Vikings didn't draft anyone at the running back. Oh, they drafted. No, they didn't draft anyone at the running back position. So, like, I was a little bit confused about this. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's just the rookies being added into the system a little bit. That's a possibility. But yeah, I mean, Jordan Mason's falling. I think Jordan Mason's going to be pretty good this year. He's another guy where, so last year they gave Aaron Jones a lot of touches. They gave Aaron Jones over 300 touches. I don't think that's what they really want to do. So I think Jordan Mason's going to be a little bit more of like a souped up, Cam Akers a little bit. Like I think Jordan Mason gets 10 to 12 touches a game. There's a possibility of that. I think this team's going to want to run the ball a lot more. I think that's one of the reasons why they brought in Jordan Mason because, essentially a rookie quarterback starting this year. They're going to want to run the ball a little bit more. I see Mason getting 150 to 180 carries this year. He's not going to do much through the air. Maybe he's the goal line guy. So if he gets 180 to 200 touches or carries, and then he's the goal line guy, he could have some fantasy value. That's kind of like best case scenario for him. But I don't know why he's falling. And I think like he has a pretty good like dynasty future as well. Like obviously in this range of guys, we're very year to year with these guys. But, you look at the guys around him, Javonte Williams, Jalen Wright, Ramondre Stevenson. These are all like, to me, he has one of the better, like, okay, long-term future possibilities. Into some wide receivers here. Rome Odunze falling 4 spots. Part of this is the rookies being added, but also part of this is Colston Loveland and Luther Burden. I don't really know what to expect from the Bears this year, if I'm being 100% honest. I was thinking, like, is DJ Moore or Rome Odunze going to, like, play a little bit more in the slot? But now that they got Luther Burden and Loveland, I don't really see those guys playing much in the slot, which does kind of hurt their fantasy potential. Generally you want guys at least playing 25, 30% of the slot, as well as on the outside in 2 wide receiver sets, just because it gives them easy targets, right? I don't know what to expect. Here's what I'll say. I know a lot of people are thinking that the Bears are going to just bring the Lions offense. Ben Johnson's going to bring the Lions offense to Chicago. And when you start thinking about this team, I think Ben Johnson is smart enough to recognize, like, we need to run an offense about who this team is, not try to replicate the Lions. And you look at the personnel here, and you have Caleb Williams, you have DJ Moore, you have Rome Odunze, you have Colston Loveland, you have Luther Burden, you have Cole Kmet, you have even Cole Kmet and DeAndre Swift in the passing game. You have really, really good pass catchers with a quarterback that seems to have all the abilities. Can he put it all together? I think there's a chance this team throws the ball a lot, like 700 times this year, because they're just going to say, this is what our strength is. We're not the Lions. We don't have Gibbs and Montgomery in our backfield. We have DeAndre Swift and a 7th-round pick in Kyle Monangai and Roschon Johnson. I think this team throws the ball 35-plus times a game. And so is there room for all these guys to eat in Loveland, Burden, Odunze, DJ Moore? It's going to be tough. But that being said, like, Odunze could be the best wide receiver out of all these guys. The thing that makes it so hard is that it's a new coaching staff coming in. We don't know, is Odunze their guy, right? Is that the guy? So we'll see. This is going to be fascinating for the Bears. Like, I mean, their offense is absolutely stacked. So if they can protect Caleb Williams, like, again, we could see 35, 40 passes a game, and I wouldn't be shocked. I would not be shocked. Ricky Pearsall from 33 to 36. Again, a little bit of just the rookies being added, but I think Ricky Pearsall is also a very interesting guy here because, the 49ers, you got Brandon Ayuk, who, he got hurt back in October. He might miss a few games. Obviously, Deebo Samuel's gone. They don't really have a deep wide receiver core. Right? You got Ayuk, who might be hurt. Then you got Jennings and Pearsall. That's your 1, 2, 3, according to the depth chart. You got a little bit of depth there with guys like Demarcus Robinson and stuff like that. Obviously, George Kittle, CMC coming back, all of this. But like Ricky Pearsall could be sneaky good this year. And I feel like we're not quite valuing him. Just think about where Xavier Worthy are, and not Brian Thomas, but Xavier Worthy really is the one I think about. Like he's wide receiver 23. Why? Because he's a young rookie first round pick who produced in year 1 on a good offense. That sounds a lot like Ricky Pearsall. Just eliminate the produce year 1. A lot of it, in my opinion, because he got shot, missed time, that slowed down his development and things like that. And the team didn't really need him, especially in the beginning when they did have everyone there, and Ayuk and Debo and Juwan Jennings and stuff like that, and Kittle. So if Ricky Pearsall has a good year, he's going to be easily a top 20 wide receiver. And you look at the guys that are ranked around Ricky Pearsall, it's going to be really, really Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, Jaden Reed, Khalil Shakir, George Pickens. If I had to bet money on all those guys I just listed, one of them to be in the top 24, the top 20 of Dynasty rankings this time next year, my bet would be Ricky Pearsall. Because I'm not saying he's going to be better than Evans or Tyreek Hill, but the age is going to hold those guys back. Age is just going to hold those guys back. That's what it does. So I think he's an interesting one, and I think he's a pretty good value right now. Chris Godwin is falling. This is a lot of it is the Emeka Ibuka injury and or a draft pick and his injury in Chris Godwin. So I also don't know. I think I'm a little bit nervous about Chris Godwin and his injury, being 29 years old, coming back from a kind of a serious injury. And I also am worried about like how much they're going to want to play Emeka Ibuka. And in my opinion, Emeka Ibuka played, not my opinion. He played a majority. He played a majority in the slot, right? And so I hope that doesn't affect Godwin. Maybe it's more of an insurance. Maybe it's more of a 2026 play, and they couldn't pass up on the talent. But it's an interesting situation. It really is. It's another situation where I'm really interested in finding out if Chris Godwin is healthy. I would assume he's going to play the majority in what he did last year in the slot and things like that. And they'll work in Jalen McMillan and Emeka Ibuka. That's just my opinion. Into some tight ends here to finish up. Cole Kmet falling. And yeah, I was kind of like in on buying low on Cole Kmet. I was in on buying him at the tight end. I put wide receiver, but tight end, 17 value. But now I'm out. Like, he's still going to be valuable to the Bears because he can do a lot of things that tight ends need to do. But for fantasy, like, man, we're worried about their top wide receivers. We can't predict what their tight end 2 is going to do for fantasy, so it sucks. Maybe he gets on another team, and I think he's a good tight end. He's still relatively young. He just turned 26 years old a couple months ago. And so, like, he has some future value, in my opinion. I think this is probably the last year with the Bears. They have an out in his contract next year, so we could see him on a new team next year, and we could be excited about him. But yeah, it's tough in the streets for Cole Kmet managers. Next up, we have Theo Johnson. I thought it was Johnny Smith. Theo Johnson, and I really wanted to talk about Theo Johnson. I put him in the post NFL draft winners for veterans who won from the NFL draft. The Giants did not draft a tight end. I think a lot of people were thinking it was a possibility for them to get a tight end at some point, not where they were drafting in the top 5 or whatever, but potentially in round 2 or something. But they didn't take a tight end until round 7. They actually didn't take a pass catcher in this draft. They drafted Thomas Fidone II. I'm not even sure if I'm saying that right. I don't know if he's a blocking tight end or whatever. I don't really care. What this means, I don't think a lot of people realize this. Theo Johnson was playing a lot of snaps last year from the get-go. And that's like half the battle for tight ends is if you have tight ends who are playing 90% 80, 90% of the snaps, they're almost like they almost always give you a floor for fantasy. Think of Cole Kmet, a couple of years ago. Really, Cole Kmet throughout his career. I don't think he's this amazing tight end, but he does everything well, and he gets him on the field, and he can have a season of 60 catches and 600 yards, or 70 catches and 700 yards. Think of Cade Otton, and why Cade Otton is kind of a fantasy producer. It's because go look at his game log. Go look at his game log. Cade Otton, he played 92.4% of the snaps last year. There was 2 games last year where he did not play in 90% or more of the snaps. And for that reason, he gives you a 60 catch, 600 yard season, which is what he did last year. And so Theo Johnson, to me, is going to be one of these guys. I don't really see, looking at their depth chart, I assume Daniel Bellinger's still there. Chris Manhertz, Greg Dulcich, okay? Like Theo Johnson, go look at his game log. He was playing 84.2% of the snaps last year. He had 4 games of under 80% of the snaps. And then you start looking at what his numbers were the last 5 games before he got hurt. In the last 5 games before he got hurt, he had 18 catches. He had 18 catches, 216 yards. Nothing to write home about, but you start to stat that out a little bit, and you're like, okay, for a rookie, that would have been a 60 catch, over a 17 game pace. For a rookie, that would have been a 60 catch, 734 yard season. And that's pretty good for a rookie. That's good for any tight end, really. What did I just say about Cade Otton and Cole Kmet? 60 catches, 600 yards. 60 catches, 700 yards. To me, Theo Johnson's going to fall into that. They need a consistent second option, and hopefully he comes back from the ACL injury and is good to go. I really, really hope so, because he's super athletic, and I think he has a lot of talent. Mike Gesicki is the last one here. I don't really understand this. I guess it's mostly rookies being, risen above. Mike Gesicki, although he's going to be inconsistent, he is like the wide receiver 3 for this team. He had really good numbers last year. The problem with Mike Gesicki is that he actually doesn't play a lot, which is, I know it would shock people, but Mike Gesicki had 65 catches, 665 yards last year. So you think, oh yeah, he must have been playing 70% of the snaps at least. He played less than 50% of the snaps last year. Less than 50%. That's why you have games like 7 for 91, and then you have games for 0 for 0 for 0, right? 0 targets, 0 catches, 0 yards. So, but to me, Mike Gesicki is their wide receiver 3. He's kind of the Tyler Boyd of this offense. Obviously, it's not going to be quite as prolific as Tyler Boyd, but it's still going to be pretty decent in my opinion. So I don't really know why he's falling. Bengals they added 1 running back in the draft. That's the only offensive skill position player they added in the draft. So that is all I have for you guys. Make sure to like and subscribe. Join our Discord. It is free. Link is in the description. Appreciate you all. Catch you guys all in the next video.